Assalamualaikum class. Today we are going to talk about nucleotides and the nucleic acids. Nucleotides have a variety of roles in cellular metabolism. They are the energy currency in metabolic transactions and the essential chemical link in the response of cells to hormones and other extracellular stimuli, and the structural component of an array of enzymes, cofactors, and metabolic intermediates. And last but not certainly the least, they are the constituents of nucleic acids, which are deoxyribonucleic acids and ribonucleic acid. They are the molecular repositories of the genetic information. The structure of every protein and ultimately of every biomolecule and cellular component is a product of information programmed into the nucleotide sequence of a cell's nucleic acid. The ability to store and transmit genetic information from one generation to the next generation is a fundamental condition for life. In this series of lecture, we will see an overview of the biochemical nature of the nucleotides and nucleic acids found in most cells. Nucleotides, the building blocks of nucleic acids. The amino acid sequence of every protein in a cell and the nucleotide sequence of every RNA is specified by a nucleotide sequence in the cell's DNA, a segment of a DNA molecule that contains the information required for the synthesis of a functional biological product, whether a protein or a RNA, is referred to as gene. A cell typically has many thousands of genes and DNA molecules. Not surprisingly, they tend to be very large. The storage and transmission of biological information are the only known functions of DNA. RNA, on the other hand, have a broad range of function and several classes are found in the cell. Ribosomal RNA or rRNAs are components of the ribosome, the complexes that carry out the synthesis of protein. Messenger RNAs or mRNAs are intermediate, carrying genetic information from one of very few genes to a ribosome where the corresponding proteins can be synthesized. While transfer RNA or tRNAs are the adapter molecules that faithfully translate the information in messenger RNA into a specific sequence of amino acid. In addition to these major classes, there is also a wide variety of RNAs with special functions that we will also discuss. Nucleotides have three characteristic components. First of all, a nitrogenous base or nitrogen containing base. Second, a pentose sugar. And third, a phosphate molecule. The molecule without the phosphate group is called a nucleoside. The nitrogenous base are derivatives of two parent compounds, pyrimidines or purines. The bases and the pentoses of the common nucleotides are heterocyclic compounds. The carbon and nitrogen atoms in the parent structures are conventionally numbered to facilitate the naming and identification of many derivatives, and the convention for the pentose ring follows rules which I think I have explained them in the sugars. But in the pentoses of the nucleotides and the nucleosides, the carbon number are given a prime designation to distinguish them from the numbered atoms of the nitrogenous bases. The base of the nucleotide is joined covalently at nitrogen number 1 of the pyrimidine and nitrogen number 9 of a purine in N-glycosyl bond to the carbon number 1 of the pentose sugar, as you can see here. And the phosphate is linked with the help of a ester bond, so we can say that this phosphate is esterified to the carbon number 5. The N-glycosyl bond is formed by the removal of the elements of the water, that is a hydroxyl group from the pentose and a hydrogen from the base, as you can see in the N-glycosidic bond formation here. Now, both DNA and RNA contain two major purine bases, which are adenine and guanine, and two major pyrimidines. In both DNA and RNA, one of the pyrimidine is a cytosine, but the second major pyrimidine is not the same in both. It is thymine in DNA and uracil in case of RNA. Only rarely does thymine occur in a RNA molecule, or a uracil is present in a DNA molecule. Now, the structure of the five major bases are shown here, and you can see them, and the nomenclature of their corresponding nucleotides and nucleosides are summarized in the table. Now, in this table, you can see the nucleosides and the nucleotides, and they are like in generic terms that include both ribo and deoxyribose form. And also, ribonucleosides and ribonucleotides are here distinguished simply as nucleosides and nucleotides. Like you can, and you can also see that deoxyribonucleosides and deoxyribonucleotides are written as deoxynucleosides and deoxynucleotides. Both forms of naming are acceptable, but the shorter names are more commonly used. Thymine is an exception, and ribothymidine is the word which is used to describe its unusual occurrence in a RNA molecule. Now you all know that nucleotides have two kind of pentose sugars or pentoses. The recurring deoxyribonucleotide unit of DNA contains 2-deoxy-D-ribose, while the ribonucleotide units of RNA contain a D-ribose. In nucleotides, both types of these pentoses are in their furanose or the closed five-membered rings form. The pentose ring is not planar, as I told you earlier in the lecture series of the carbohydrates and sugars, but it is present in one of a variety of conformations which are generally described as puckered. Now look at the figure on the right side, and in this figure you can see the structures and names of four major deoxyribonucleotides, the which are the structural units of DNA, and four major ribonucleotides, which are the structural units of RNA. Now, specific long sequences of A, T, G, and C nucleotides in DNA are the repositories of genetic information. Although nucleotides bearing the major purines and pyrimidines are the most common, but both DNA and RNA also contain some minor bases. In DNA, common of these are methylated forms of the major bases, while in some viral DNA, certain bases may be hydroxymethylated or they may also be glycosylated. Altered or unusual bases in the DNA molecules often have roles in regulating or protecting the genetic information. Minor bases of many types are also found in RNA, especially in the case of a transfer RNA molecule. Now here you can see the structure of some of the minor purines and pyrimidines bases. All the nucleotides bearing the major purines and pyrimidines are most common, but as I told you, both DNA and RNA they contain some minor bases. In the right side, you see the of the figure, you can see minor bases of DNA, and here you can see that 5-methylcytidine occurs in the DNA of animals and higher plants, while N6 methyladenosine is present in the bacterial DNA. And we have 5-hydroxymethylcytidine, which is present in the DNA of bacteria infected with certain bacteriophages. On the other side of the figure, on the right side, you see some of the minor bases of a transfer RNA molecule. We have a very commonly found inosine that contains the base hypoxyxanthine, and you can note that that the pseudouridine, like the uridine, contains uracil group inside it, and they are distinct in the point of attachment to the ribose sugar in the uridine molecule. And uracil is attached by the help of nitrogen number 1, which is the usual attachment point for the pyrimidines in the pseudouridine, and it is linked with the carbon number 5. In the case of DNA, the most common of these bases, you can see they are methylated, and in some viral DNA, they may be hydroxymethylated, as I told you, and they may also be glycosylated. The successive nucleotides of both DNA and RNA are covalently linked through phosphate group bridges, in which the 5-phosphate group of one nucleotide unit is joined to the 3-hydroxyl group of the next nucleotide, creating a phosphodiester linkage. Thus, the covalent backbones of the nucleic acid consist of alternating phosphate and pentose residues, and the nitrogenous bases may be regarded as a side group joined to the backbone at regular intervals. The backbone of both DNA and RNA are hydrophilic. The hydroxyl group of the sugar residues from the hydrogen forms the hydrogen bonds with the water molecule. The phosphate group, which has a pKa nearly equal to zero, are completely ionized and negatively charged at neutral pH or pH 7, and the negative charges are generally neutralized by ionic interaction with positive charges on proteins, metal ions, and polyamines. All the phosphodiester linkages have the same orientation along the chain, giving each linear nucleic acid strand a specific polarity and distinct 5 to 3' end. By definition, the 5' end lacks a nucleotide at the 5 position and the 3' end lacks a nucleotide at position number 3. Other groups, most often one or more phosphate, may be present on one or both ends. The covalent backbone of DNA and RNA is subjected to slow monoenzymatic hydrolysis of the phosphodiester bond. Now let's just consider that in a test tube, if a RNA molecule is hydrolyzed rapidly under alkaline conditions, but DNA is not, the two hydroxyl group in the RNA, which are actually absent in DNA, they are directly involved in the process. Cyclic 2,3 monophosphate nucleotides are the first products of the actions of the alkali on a RNA molecule and are rapidly hydrolyzed further to yield a mixture of 2 and 3 nucleoside monophosphate, as you can see in this figure. And in this figure, you can see the hydrolysis of a RNA under alkaline condition. The 2-hydroxyl act as a nucleophile in an intermolecular displacement reaction, and the 2,3 cyclic monophosphate derivative is further hydrolyzed to a mixture of 2 and 3 monophosphate. Now, DNA, which lacks 2-hydroxyl group, is therefore stable under similar conditions. The nucleotide sequence of the nucleic acid can be represented schematically, as you can see in this diagram, by a segment of DNA with 5 nucleotide units. The phosphate groups are here symbolized by a letter capital P, and each deoxyribose is symbolized by a vertical line from carbon number 1 at the top to carbon number 5 at the bottom. But you should keep into your mind that the sugar is always in its closed ring furanose form in the nucleic acid. The connecting lines between the nucleotides which pass through the phosphates are they are drawn here in a diagonal fashion from the middle carbon number 3 and the deoxyribose of one nucleotide to the bottom carbon number 5 of the next. Now, by convention, the structure of a single strand of a nucleic acid is always written with the 5' end, and it is always going to end with the 3' end at the right. And that's it. And therefore, we can say the direction is from 5 to 3' end. Some simpler representation of the pentadeoxyribonucleotides are we can just write that 5' end with the sequence of bases such as A, C, G, and T, and then at the other end there is the hydroxyl group with the other 3' end. A short nucleotide is referred to as a nucleotide. An oligonucleotide, the definition of a short is somewhat arbitrary, but like polymers which contain like 50 or less than 50 nucleotides are generally called the oligonucleotide. A longer nucleic acid molecule is therefore called a polynucleotide. Free pyrimidines and purines are weakly basic in nature, and they are therefore they are called bases, and they have a variety of chemical properties that affect the structure and ultimately the function of nucleic acid. The purines and pyrimidines, which are common in DNA and RNA, they are highly conjugated molecules, which is a property with the important consequences for the structure, electron distribution, and light absorption of nucleic acid. Resonance among the atoms in the ring gives most of the bond a partial double bond character. The purines and pyrimidine bases are hydrophobic and they are relatively insoluble in water at pH equal to like 7 or the neutral pH of the cell. At acidic and alkaline pH of the pH, the bases become charged and their solubility in the water is going to increase. Hydrophobic stacking interactions in which two or more bases are positioned with the planes of their rings like like the stacks, the coins, are one of the two important modes of interaction between the bases in the nucleic acids. Now, before looking at the structure of nucleic acids in detail, we should talk a little about the discovery of DNA. Now, the discovery of the structure of DNA by Watson and Crick in 1953 was a momentous event in science, an event that gave rise to an entirely new discipline and influenced the course of many established ones. Our present understanding of the storage and utilization of cells' genetic information is actually based on the work which was made possible by this discovery, and an outline of how genetic information is processed by the cell is now a prerequisite for the discussion of any area of biochemistry. Here we are going to talk about the structure of the DNA itself and the events that led to the discovery and more recent refinements in our understanding. RNA structure is also introduced a little bit in this lecture, and as in the case of protein structure, it is sometimes useful to describe nucleic acid structure in terms of like a hierarchical level of complexity. For, like we did for protein, we first of all explained their primary structure, then secondary, tertiary, then quaternary. We are going to do the same for the structure of nucleic acid. The primary structure of a nucleic acid is its covalent structure and the nucleotide sequence. Any regular, stable structure taken up by some or all of the nucleotides in a nucleic acid can be referred to as a secondary. All structures considered in the remainder of this lecture will fall under the heading of the secondary structure. The complex folding of large chromosomes within the eukaryotic chromatin and the bacterial nucleotides is generally considered to be the tertiary structures of nucleic acids. So, the biochemical investigation of DNA began with Frederick Miescher, who carried out the first systematic chemical studies of cell nuclei. In 1868, Miescher isolated a phosphorus containing substance which is called the nuclein from the nuclei of the pus cells, which are the white blood cells or the nucleocytes, and he obtained these cells from the discharged and discarded surgical bandages. He found that nuclein consists of an acidic portion, which we now know as DNA, and a basic portion, which is actually the protein. Michel later found a similar acidic substance in the heads of the sperm cells from the salmon fish. Although he partially purified nuclein and studied its property, the covalent or primary structure of the DNA, as you can see here, was not known until the late 1940s. Mister and many others suspected that nuclein, which is actually the nucleic acid, they were associated in some way with the cellular inheritance. But the first direct evidence in the DNA is the bearer's genetic information came in 1944 through a discovery which was made by Avery, McLeod, and McCarthy. You can see their images on the right side. These investigators found that the DNA extracted from a virulent is actually a disease causing strain of bacteria, from a virulent strain of Streptococcus pneumonia, also known as the pneumococcus, genetically transformed in non-virulent strains of this organism into a virulent form. Avery and his colleagues concluded that the DNA extracted from the virulent strain carried the inheritable genetic message for virulence. Not everyone accepted these conclusions, but because the proteins impurities were present in the DNA could have been like the carrier of the genetic information. Now, this possibility was soon eliminated by the findings that the treatment of the DNA with proteolytic enzymes did not destroy the transforming activity, but treatment with the deoxyribonucleases, which are the enzymes which destroy the DNA or hydrolyze the DNA, it destroyed this transforming ability. Now, what experiment they conducted? Let's look at this experiment and its conclusion in an animated video.
In our cells is the genetic material? Although the answer seems obvious today, it's DNA, it took 3 scientists almost 20 years of hard work to discover this. The scientists Oswald Avery, Colin MacLeod, and Macklin McCarty began their search because of a surprising discovery made by Frederick Griffith in 1928. Griffith found that if a virulent strain of pneumococcus bacteria, known as the 3S strain, was heat-killed, mixed with live pneumococcus bacteria of the non-virulent 2R strain, and injected into mice, some of the R bacteria were transformed into living infectious 3S bacteria, which killed the mice. In addition, all descendants of the transformed bacteria were also infectious. Griffith knew that some component of the heat-killed S cells was responsible for this genetic change, but he did not know which one. He called the unknown agent the transforming principle. After Griffith published his findings, Avery and his colleagues set out to find the identity of the transforming principle. First, they broke open or lysed heat-killed 3S bacteria with a detergent, releasing the contents of the cells. Then, they used a centrifuge to separate the cellular contents, known as the cell extract, from the cellular debris. To make sure that the extract contained the transforming principle, the extract was mixed with a culture of living 2R bacteria. Then the mixture was incubated and plated on a petri dish. Colonies of 3S bacteria appeared on the plate, indicating that the 2R bacteria had been transformed. Avery and his colleagues now knew that one of the components of the extract, polysaccharides, proteins, DNA, or RNA, was responsible for the transformation, so they developed a method to isolate and test each one for its ability to transform bacteria. First, the extract was mixed with an enzyme called S3 to remove the polysaccharides. A sample of the treated extract was then mixed with 2R bacteria, incubated, and plated on a petri dish. 3S colonies appeared on the plate, indicating that the transformation had taken place even without the presence of polysaccharides. Therefore, polysaccharides could not be the transforming principle. Next, the extract was treated with protease enzyme, which digested the proteins. A sample of the protease-treated extract was then tested to see if it still contained the transforming principle. Once again, 3S colonies appeared on the plate, showing that proteins could not transform bacteria. Since both polysaccharides and proteins had been removed from the extract, the remaining extract contained only the nucleic acids DNA and RNA. To test each nucleic acid independently, Avery and his colleagues used enzymes known as nucleases. First, they used RNase to break down the RNA in the extract. A sample of the RNase-treated extract was then tested. As before, the presence of 3S colonies on the plate proved that RNA was not the transforming principle. Finally, a sample of the nucleic acid mixture was treated with DNase to destroy the DNA. After incubation with 2R bacteria, the sample was plated. This time, no 3S colonies appeared on the plate. Because the transforming principle was destroyed when DNA was removed from the extract, Avery and his colleagues concluded that the transforming principle must be DNA.
After the discovery that was made related to DNA by Avery, McLeod, and McCarty, a second important experiment provided independent evidence of the DNA as it carries genetic information. In 1952, Alfred Hershey and Martha Chase used radioactive phosphorus, which is called P32, and radioactive sulfur, which is the sulfur 35 tracers, to show that when the bacterial viruses, which are also called as bacteriophages or T2 phages, they infect the host cell. For example, the bacterial cell can be an E. coli cell, as you can see in this figure. It is the phosphorus containing DNA of the viral particle, not the sulfur containing proteins of the viral coat, that enters the host cell and furnishes the genetic information for the viral replication. and you can see their experiment like in a cartoon representation here. These important early experiments and many other lines of evidence show that the DNA is the exclusive chromosomal component bearing the genetic information of the living cell. Now let's look at the experiment that was conducted by Hershey and Chase in an animated video.
In the Hershey-Chase experiment, bacterial viruses called phage were used to demonstrate that DNA is the genetic material. The phage used in this experiment consisted of a DNA molecule surrounded by a protein coat. When phage infect bacteria, they attach to the surface of the bacterium and inject the DNA into the cell. The protein coat remains on the outside of the cell. In the first part of the experiment, phage were produced in a medium containing S35 radioactively labeled amino acids. This resulted in a phage population with S35 labeled proteins, but no radioactive label in the DNA. The phage were then allowed to infect the bacteria. The phage attached to the bacterial cell and injected their DNA, but the radioactively labeled protein coat remained on the outside of the cell. The phage produced in these cells contained no radioactivity. Vigorous shaking caused the empty protein coats to be removed, but did not interfere with production of new phage in the cell. In the second part of the experiment, phage were produced in a medium containing P32 labeled deoxyribonucleotides. This resulted in a phage population with P32 labeled DNA, but no radioactive label in the protein. When the phage infected the bacteria, the P32 labeled DNA entered the cell and could be found in phage subsequently produced in the infected bacteria. This demonstrated that the DNA, but not the protein, carries the genetic information for a new generation of phage.
Now, after the initial discovery or identification of DNA as the main genetic material carrying information from one generation to another generation, several studies were conducted to find out that the DNA molecules have a distinctive base composition. A most important clue to the structural DNA came from the work of Erwin Chergaff and his colleagues in the late 1940s. They found that the four nucleotide bases of DNA occur in different ratios in the DNAs of different organisms and that the amounts of certain bases are closely related. These data collected from the DNAs of a great many different species led Chergaff to have the following conclusion. First, the base composition of DNA generally varies from one species to another. Second conclusion was that DNA specimens isolated from different tissues of the same species have the same base composition. Third, he concluded that the base composition of DNA in a given species does not change with an organism's age, nutritional state, or changing environment. Fourth, he concluded that all cellular DNA, regardless of the species, the number of adenosine residues is equal to the number of thymidine residue. That is, number of A is equal to number of T, and the number of guanosine residues is equal to the number of cytidine residues, that is G is equal to C. From these relationship, it follows that the sum of the purine residues equal to the sum of the palmidine residues, that is AGTC. These quantitative relationships, which are sometimes also called as Chargaff's rules, were confirmed by many subsequent researchers, and they were used as a key to establishing the three-dimensional structure of DNA and yielded clues to how genetic information is encoded in a DNA molecule and passed from one generation to the next. To shed more light on the structure of DNA, Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkin used the powerful method of X-ray diffraction analysis to analyze DNA fibers. They showed in the early 1950s that DNA produces a characteristic X-ray diffraction pattern. From this pattern, it was deduced that DNA molecules are helical with two periodicities along their long axis, a primary one of 3.4 angstrom and a secondary one of 34 angstrom. You can see that in the figure on the right side. You can see the diffraction pattern of a DNA molecule between the picture of Rosalind and Wilkin, and to like in the first image on the left side, you can see the numbers or the unit of length as angstrom. On the right side, you can see the same thing written in nanometer. You just have to remember that 1 angstrom is equal to 0 0.1 nanometer. Now, the problem then was to formulate a three-dimensional model of DNA molecule that could account not only for the extra diffraction data but also for specific AT and GC bases equivalences, which were actually discovered by Chargaff for the other chemical properties of DNA. In 1953, Watson and Crick postulated a three-dimensional model of DNA structure that accounted for all the available data. It consists of two helical DNA chains wound around the same axis to form a right-handed double helix. The hydrophilic backbones of the alternating deoxyribose and the phosphate groups are on the outside of the double helix facing the surrounding water. The furanose ring of each deoxyribose is in the carbon number 2 endoconformation. The purines and pyrimidine bases of both strands are stacked inside the double helix with the hydrophobic and nearly planar ring structures, which are very close to each other, and they are perpendicular to the long axis, as you can see on the figure on the right. The offset pairing of the two strands creates a major groove and a minor groove. You can see the major and the minor groove here, and it is present on the surface of the duplex. Now, each nucleotide basis of one strand is paired with the same plane with a base of the other strand. Watson and Crick found that the hydrogen bonded base pairs, as you can see in the figure, in which G is paired with the C and A is paired with the D, and those that fit the best within the structure, providing a rationale for the Chargaff's rule that is in any DNA, GC and AT are going to be like equal. It is important to note that the three hydrogen bonds formed between the GC and symbolized by G, which is linked with the bonds with a C molecule, but only two can be formed between between a adenine and a thymine residue, which are symbolized by two lines between them. Now, this is one reason for finding the separation of paired DNA strand is more difficult the higher the ratio of GC to AT base pair. Other pairing of the bases tend to to varying degrees to it tends to destabilize the double helical structure. When Watson and Crick constructed their model, they had to decide at the outset whether the strands of DNA should be parallel or anti-parallel, whether their 5 to 3 phosphodiester bond should run in the same or in the opposite direction. And antipolar orientation produced the most convincing model, and later work on the DNA polymerases provided experimental evidence that the strands are indeed antiparallel, and this finding was ultimately confirmed by X-ray analysis of the DNA molecule. Now, to account for the periodicities observed in the X-ray diffraction patterns of the DNA fiber, Watson and Crick manipulated molecular models to arrive at a structure in which the vertically stacked bases inside the double helix would be 3.4 angstroms apart. The secondary repeated distance of about 34 angstrom was accounted for by the presence of 10 bases in each complete turn of a double helix. In an aqueous solution, the structure differs slightly from that in the fiber, having around 10.5 base pairs per helical turn. As you can see in the figure, the two antiparallel polynucleotide chains of the double helical DNA are not identical in either base sequence or composition. Instead, they are complementary. They are complementary to each other. Now, wherever adenine occurs in one chain, thymine is found in the other. Similarly, wherever guanine is present in one chain, cytosine is found in the other. The helix DNA model or the duplex is held together by two forces. As I have described earlier, these are hydrogen bonding between the complementary bases, and they are responsible for the base stacking interactions. Now, the complementarity between the DNA strand is attributed to the hydrogen bonding between the base pairs. The base stacking interactions, the other type of forces which are holding this duplex molecule, they are largely non-specific with respect to the identity of these stacked bases, and they make the major contribution to the stability of the double helix molecule. The important feature of the double helical model of the DNA structure are supported by much chemical and biological evidence. Moreover, the model immediately suggested a mechanism for the transmission of genetic information as well. The essential feature of the model is the complementarity of the two DNA strands, as Watson and Crick were also able to see well before confirmatory data became available. The structure could logically be replicated by first separating the two strands and then by synthesizing a complementary strand for each of them. Because nucleotide in each new strand are joined in a sequence specified by the base pairing rules, which were like Chargaff rule, each pre-existing strand functions as a template to guide the synthesis of one complementary strand. These explanations were experimentally confirmed, inaugurating a revolution in our understanding of biological inheritance. Let's look at different forms of DNA. We all know that DNA is a remarkably flexible molecule. Considerable rotation is possible around a number of bonds in the sugar phosphate or phosphodeoxyribose backbone, and their thermal fluctuation can produce bending, stretching, and unpairing, which is also called melting of the strands. Many significant deviations from the Watson-Crick DNA structure are found in cellular DNA, some or all of which may play important role in DNA metabolism. These structural variations generally do not affect the key properties of DNA, which were actually described by Watson and Crick, which means that strand complementarity, antiparallel strands, and the requirement of AT and GC base pairing. Structural variations of DNA reflect three things. The different possible conformations of the deoxyribose, rotation about the contagious bonds that make up the phosphodeoxyribose backbone, and the free rotation about the carbon number 1 of the N-glycosyl bond. Because of the steric constraints, purines in purine nucleotides are restricted by the two stable conformation with respect to deoxyribose, and they are called the syn and anti. Pyrimidines are generally restricted to the anti conformation because of the steric interference between the sugar and the carbonyl oxygen at carbon number 2 of the pyrimidine molecule. The Watson-Crick structure is also referred to as the B form of the DNA or bDNA, as you can see here in the figure. The B form is the most stable form or structure for a random DNA sequence molecule under physiological condition, and it is therefore the standard point of reference in any study of the properties of the DNA. The two structural variants that have been well characterized in crystal structures are the A form and the Z form or the Z form. These three DNA conformations are also shown in the figure. You can see them along with some of their properties. The A form is favored in many solutions that are relatively devoid of water. The DNA is still arranged in a right-handed double helix, but the helix is wider. You can see that, and the number of bases per helical turn is 11 rather than 10.5 as in bDNA. The plane of these base pairs in aDNA is tilted at about an angle of 20 with respect to the helical axis. These structural changes deepen the major groove while making the minor groove a little more shallow. The reagents used for to promote crystallization of the DNA, they tend to dehydrate it, and thus most DNA, short DNA molecule, tend to crystallize in the A form. On the other hand, we have the Z form or the Z form. This Z form of the DNA is more radical departure from the B structure. The most obvious distinction is the left-handed helical rotation. There are 12 base pair per helical turn, and the structures appears more cylinder and elongated. The DNA backbone takes a zigzag appearance. Certain nucleotide sequences fold into left-handed Z or Z helices much more readily than the others. Prominent examples are the sequences in which the pyrimidines alternate with purines, especially alternating C and G or 5-methyl G and C residues. To form the left-handed helix in the zDNA, the purine residues flip to the syn configuration, alternating with the pyrimidines in the anti-conformation. The major groove is barely apparent in the zDNA and the minor groove is narrow and deep. Whether aDNA occurs in cells is uncertain, but there is evidence for some short stretches, or we can also call them tracts of zDNA in both prokaryotes as well as in eukaryotes. The zDNA tracks many, and it may these tracks may play a role which are like actually not very defined yet in regulating the expression of some genes or in genetic recombination. We now turn our attention briefly to the DNA structure, to the expression of genetic information that it contains. RNA, which is the second major form of the nucleic acid in the cells, has many functions. In gene expression, you all know that RNA act as as an intermediate molecule by using the information encoded in DNA to specify the amino acid sequence of a functional protein. Now, given that the DNA of the eukaryote is largely confined to the nucleus, whereas protein synthesis occurs on the ribosomes in the cytoplasm, some molecules other than DNA must carry the genetic message from the nucleus and from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. As early as in 1950s, RNA was considered the logical candidate. RNA is found in both the nucleus and also in the cytoplasm, and as you know, an increase in the protein synthesis is accompanied by an increase in the amount of cytoplasmic RNA and an increase in its rate of like turnover. These and other observations led to several researchers to suggest that RNA carries genetic information from DNA to the protein biosynthetic machinery of the ribosome. We had Francis Jacob and Monod. In 1961, they presented a unified, which may be called as essentially correct picture for many aspects of this process. They proposed the name messenger RNA or mRNA for the portion of the total cellular RNA carrying the genetic information from DNA to the ribosomes, where the messenger provides the template that specify amino acid sequence in polypeptide chain. All the messenger RNA from the different genes can vary greatly in the length. The messenger RNA from a particular gene generally have a defined size. The process of forming messenger RNA on a DNA template is known as transcription. In prokaryotes, there is a single messenger RNA molecule which may code for one or many polypeptide chain. If it carries the code for only one polypeptide chain, the messenger RNA is called monocentric. But if it carries code for like two or more than two different polypeptides, the messenger RNA is called polycistronic. So monocistronic and polycistronic. In case of eukaryotes, most messenger RNA are monocistronic. For this purpose, we are using this word of cistron, to which means actually genes. Now, the minimum length of the messenger RNA is set by the length of the polypeptide chain for which it codes. For example, a polypeptide chain of like if it is 100 amino acid long residues, it requires a RNA coding sequence for at least 300 nucleotides because each amino acid is coded by a nucleotide triplet And however, a messenger RNA which is described from the DNA are always somewhat longer than the length needed simply to code for a polypeptide sequence or sequences. In addition, non-coding RNA include sequences that regulate protein synthesis, and in this figure, you can see the process of like transcription and then translation taking place, and you can also see in the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell the differences between the messenger RNA molecule. In addition to their role as the subunits of nucleic acids, nucleotides have a variety of other functions in every cell. They can act as energy carriers, components of the enzyme cofactors, and the chemical messengers as well. The phosphate group covalently linked at the 5-hydroxyl of a ribonucleotide may have one or two additional phosphates attached with it. The resulting molecule are referred to as a nucleoside, mono, di, or triphosphate, depending upon the number of phosphate molecules that are attached with it. Starting from the ribose, three phosphates are generally labeled, and hydrolysis of the nucleotide triphosphate provides the chemical energy to derive a wide variety of cellular reactions. Adenosine 5-triphosphate or ATP is by far the most widely used for this purpose, but UTP, GTP, and CTP are also used in some reactions. Nucleoside triphosphates also serve as the activated precursors of DNA and RNA synthesis. The energy released by the hydrolysis of ATP and other nucleoside triphosphate is accounted for by the structure of a triphosphate group. The bond between the ribose and the phosphate is, as I told you, it is an ester linkage. The and You see that in the linkage are phosphoanhydrides, and hydrolysis of the ester linkage yields about 14 kilojoules per mole of energy under standard conditions, whereas hydrolysis of each anhydride bond yields about 30 kilojoules per mole. ATP hydrolysis often plays an important thermodynamic role in the biosynthetic pathways. When coupled to a reaction with the positive free energy change, adenosine triphosphate hydrolysis shifts the equilibrium of the overall process to favor product formation. And I hope you remember the equilibrium constant from the series of lectures of bioenergetics. And if you like try to understand this relationship of equilibrium constant and free energy change by keeping those lectures in your mind, it will be like more logical and more understandable. You see the structure of coenzyme A, NAD, and FAD molecule. As I told you, there are a variety of enzyme cofactors serving as a wide range of chemical function include adenosine as a part of their structure. You see the structure within the red ring. They are unrelated structurally except for the presence of adenosine. In none of these cofactors does the adenosine portion participate directly in the primary function, but removal of adenosine generally results in a drastic reduction of the activity of these cofactors. For example, if removal of the adenosine nucleotide, which is from the acetoacetyl coenzyme A, the coenzyme A derivatives of the acetoacetate reduces its reactivity as a substrate for alpha ketoglutarate or for the ketoacyl coenzyme A transferase. Which is an enzyme of the lipid metabolism by a factor of about 106. Although this requirement for adenosine has not been investigated in much detail, it must involve the binding energy between the enzyme and the substrate or cofactor that is used for both in the catalysis and in stabilizing the initial enzyme substrate complex. In the case of alpha ketoacyl coenzyme A transferase, the nucleotide moiety of the coenzyme A appears to be a binding handle that helps to pull the substrate, which is acetoacetyl coenzyme A, into the active site. Similar roles may be found in the nucleoside portion of the nucleotide cofactors. Now, why is adenosine rather than some other large molecule used in these structures? Now, the answer here may involve a form of evolutionary economy. Adenosine is certainly not unique in the amount of potential binding energy that it contributes. The importance of adenosine probably lies not so much in some special chemical characteristics as in the evolutionary advantage of using one compound for multiple roles. Once ATP becomes the universal source of chemical energy, systems developed to synthesize ATP in a greater abundance than the other nucleotide because it's abundant, because it is present in large quantity. It becomes the logical choice for incorporation into a wide variety of. The economy extends to protein structure. A single protein domain that bind adenosine can be used in a wide variety of enzymes. Such a domain, called as nucleotide binding fold, is found in many enzymes that bind ATP molecule and a nucleotide cofactor. Now, these cells respond to their environment by taking cues from the hormones or other external chemical signals. The interaction of these extracellular chemical signals, which are actually called as the first messengers, with the receptors on the cell surface often lead to the production of second messengers inside the cell, which in turn lead to adaptive changes in the cell's interior. Often the second messenger is a nucleotide. One of the most common is adenosine 3,5 cyclic monophosphate, which is also generally known as cyclic AMP or CAMP. You can see its structure here. It is formed from ATP in a reaction catalyzed by adenylyl cyclase enzyme, which is associated with the inner phase of plasma membrane. Cyclic AMP serves regulatory function in virtually every cell outside the plant kingdom. Guanosine 3,5 cyclic monophosphate or cyclic GMP is present in many cells and also has regulatory function. Another regulatory nucleotide is guanosine pentaphosphate, which is here represented by the structure on the right side, which is written as PPGPP. It is produced in bacteria in response to a slowdown in protein synthesis during amino acid starvation. This nucleotide inhibits the synthesis of the RNA and of the ribosomal RNA and transfer RNA molecule needed for protein synthesis, preventing the unnecessary production of nucleic acids. So we then finally come to the end of this small lecture on nucleotides, and we finally summarize our lecture with just few points. First of all, a nucleotide consists of a nitrogenous base, which can be a purine or a pyrimidine, a pentose sugar, and one or more phosphate group. Nucleic acids are polymers of nucleotides joined together by the phosphodiester linkage between the 5' hydroxyl group of one pentose and the 3' hydroxyl group of the next. Second, there are two types of nucleic acid, DNA and RNA. The nucleotides in the RNA contain ribose and the common pyrimidine bases are uracil and cytosine. In DNA, the nucleotide consists of 2-deoxyribose and the common pyrimidine bases are thymine and cytosine. The primary purines are adenine and guanine in both RNA and DNA. DNA can exist in several structural forms. Two variations of the Watson-Crick model or BDNA are A form and the Z form. Some sequence-dependent structural variation cause bends in the DNA molecule, and DNA strand with appropriate sequence can form different type of three-dimensional structures, which may be called as the triplex or tetraplex DNA molecule. Messenger RNA transfers genetic information from DNA to the ribosomes for protein synthesis. Transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA are also involved in protein synthesis. RNA can be structurally complex. Single RNA strand can be folded into different type of structures such as hairpins, double-stranded regions, or complex loops. Then nucleotides can serve many other functions as well. For example, in the ATP molecule, which is the central carrier of the chemical energy in the cell, the presence of adenosine moiety in a variety of enzyme cofactor may be related to the binding energy requirements. Then we had cyclic AMP, which is formed from the ATP in a reaction catalyzed by the adenylyl cyclase. It is a common second messenger produced in response to hormones and other chemical signals.